What's up, Vaultheads? So we're expecting to see some more Borderlands 4 today at the PlayStation State of Play event, and I thought I'd do a little pre-show to that, just going over a few of the main points, the main things that are on my mind leading into this next reveal of the game. Hopefully we'll get to see something a bit more concrete here today and get a better idea about the world that's going to be in Borderlands 4 and the Vault Hunters themselves. So there's a few things that I've been thinking about. There's a number of things story-wise that I have curiosities about. There's definitely spoilers here, so if you want to avoid information about the story in Borderlands 4, then don't watch this video. But yeah, there's a few things here we're going to cover that you maybe haven't seen, and then there's going to be a number of things where I'm just speculating, so you know, the chances are most of that won't actually be in the game, but I'll be talking about things that are based on things we have seen in the trailers, so maybe I'll get something right, who knows. But we'll just chew on this for a while. I'll just chat on a few things that are on my mind as we head into the Borderlands 4 State of Play. And yeah, just things to look out for while we're watching this next reveal. So the first thing I'm going to be looking out for tonight is going to be the guns. There's a few things that we've seen so far. The guns look pretty nice and varied. The two main revelations that I think we might hear something about today is one, I think the Bandit manufacturer type will be back. So the Bandit guns were in earlier Borderlands games but taken out for Borderlands 3 and were replaced by the Children of the Vault, the COV guns. But we've seen some weapons that definitely look like they could be a reimagining of the Bandit weapons, so I'm excited to see if those are making a comeback. And I think there's going to be a new manufacturer in Borderlands 4, at least one. There's two guns, at least, that we've seen so far that appear to not fit in any of the current manufacturers. The style is just a little bit different. You've got one firing a buzzsaw we saw in the trailer, and then another one that Flo was running around it with. They have just a good bit of character to them. I think that they could be really interesting weapons, so I'm pretty excited to see those. Then we got the Vault Hunters themselves, which, to be perfectly honest, I think that these were originally designed for Wonderlands. This was going to be a mage, a Viking, or like a barbarian type, an assassin, and then we've got like a necromancer. I think that these were originally designed for that, and then they took that in a different direction with Wonderlands, and they've been repurposed because they would have started some of the mechanics and some of the programming for the characters. I think they just decided to pull them across to Borderlands 4. Which I think is a bad decision, and I think that's probably part of the reason why I'd say 90% plus generally aren't very keen on these Vault Hunters. They look a bit bland. You can tell that something looks off with them, and I think that's basically coming down to that they were originally designed for a completely different purpose, and because they've been repurposed, they've just kind of put new clothes on them and given them a bit of a different vibe. It's obvious that there isn't the proper cohesion that you would expect to see with characters that are sort of bespoke designed to be in a game. Like, there's a long lengthy process of how that normally is done, and I don't think that that's happened here, and I think that it's just instinctive that everyone can see that these Vault Hunters look a little bit off. But we'll find out a bit more about that. Maybe it won't be as cut and dry, maybe it won't be just the 4 Vault Hunters as we're sort of believing it to be, but we'll wait and see. Either way, to see more on the Vault Hunters and get a bit more clarity and start to see them in action a bit more, and maybe get a bit of excitement, a bit more of an idea of what their suite of tools is going to be, and what the actual gaming experience will be, because that's ultimately what it comes down to. Like, the look and the fashion are definitely secondary. You want the mechanics to be there, and you want them to feel good and just, you know, have a great time running around on Kairos with them. And I say running around, but we've also got this indication that the 4 Vault Hunters may have very specific vehicles for them this time. They may have vehicles that are deliberately for those characters. And I wondered this in one of my previous videos, but because we've got this big open world that we're meant to be navigating, maybe Gearbox has done something a bit clever here. Maybe they've actually kind of brought the vehicles into more like central gameplay, because if you've got these vehicles that are actually designed for the characters, and they maybe work with them in as sort of more like an extension of their body, then perhaps we'll have the situation where you've got maybe not skill trees, but you've maybe got ways you can upgrade the vehicles, or maybe they'll have a bit of a synergy with the character so that you can actually yeah, just have a bit more of a specific experience for that different Vault Hunter you're with, and those vehicles may have different movement abilities or weaponry abilities. Who knows? If they've done that right, that could be very good. I was originally against the idea of sort of individual vehicles, but that's definitely a possibility and definitely a good way they could enhance the overall vehicle experience of the Borderlands games. Just while we're on the topic of Vault Hunters as well, although we think it's going to be 4 Vault Hunters, maybe it won't be that straightforward, but at the same time, I have to confess that I was really looking for a big kind of revelation from Borderlands. I was looking for a big way to change things up. And in the history of the Borderlands games, 4-player co-op has been basically a constant. And it's originally 4-player co-op came around with games because you'd be sharing a screen together, sitting on the couch, and so different games would split into a 4-player. Since then, we've seen other games like Destiny do a 3-player thing. Battleborn did 5 players. You know, I'm really looking for an evolution in that. Like, you've got the co-op experience of Borderlands. How could you make it more chaotic? And one of the things I was kind of hoping that Gearbox would go out on a limb and do was, let's make this 6-player. Let's pull back the 6-player roster from Borderlands 2, because that was definitely superior to just 4 Vault Hunters in Borderlands 3. To have 6 different characters to work through with all of their different skills and attributes and builds and all of that to explore, but have it so that those characters could all be used at the same time, have the entire game designed so that 6 players can work, because there's definitely a hole in the market for that kind of thing right now, because you've got a lot of popularity from 6-player through raids in Destiny, and a lot of people maybe can't get their team together for that sort of thing. It's still in Destiny 2, I think it's still only 11% or something like that of Destiny players that have actually even cleared a raid. So to have another game where you can just play through the story, and presumably Borderlands 4 will have end game and other activities, but to have that whole 6-player experience as a way you can hang out with your buddies, and you can chat and socialize while playing and experience this game together, and have the game ramped up to a 6-player difficulty, and maybe have like options so you can do that for fun stuff for single players or smaller parties to increase your challenge, to then increase your loot chances, whatever else. I really thought that would be the way to go with the game. I don't think that's what we're going to see, but we've still got a lot to find out. But yeah, I was really hoping for something like that. So if nothing else, I really hope that they get out of the rigid 4 Vault Hunters mechanic, and there's some other expansion to that, or we will see other Vault Hunters that come over time, or some more variety and customization. Who knows? We'll find out later. And thinking about that, just in terms of the content of the game, we're expecting our full story playthrough. And there's a few things that I think were missing from Borderlands 3. The formula from Borderlands 1 and 2 allowed you to rank all the way up through the story, and then you would finish the story and you could start the whole game again. But it got way harder. It got more crazy. You had more enemies. So you would still be able to pick and choose what missions you did as you went through, side quest wise, but you could dot your playthrough so that you had different experience on your first, second, and third playthrough. But the chaos just got more and more. The game at its peak would have been Borderlands 2. If you were playing on UHVM, Ultimate Vault Hunter mode, it just was such a crazy experience. And that was, still, I don't think Borderlands 3 surpassed that in any way. It did take a time commitment, and I do feel that there was work that needed to be done in order to do that. Like, again, an evolution of the game, in my opinion, would have been that you would have those different playthroughs available, but they would be more designed, I guess, sort of like they did some of the special event stuff in Borderlands 3. I think it would have to be more bespoke, but you'd have your original playthrough, and then you would restart the game carrying on your character, but they would have to make specific changes to the world. So you could have it so there's some end of the story, something happens that affects the whole world, and then kind of like the timeline goes back, and then you play through the story, but things are different. Some things are different, and there's maybe like specific enemy types that are sort of classing everything up, and new weapons that can drop, and you could do that for a couple of different playthroughs. So it's almost like a completely different experience, but there's stuff that's exclusive to those different playthroughs that you can pick to drop into as you like. there's potential with that. You know, the idea of the timekeeper and maybe this time related enemy could definitely open up something like that. And we've seen a lot of revisiting in the past by Gearbox in the Borderlands games. We had a little bit of a flashback at the end of Borderlands 2 story where we returned to the Arid Nexus. And you've got in the pre-sequel, which I don't like talking about because I'm not a fan of the pre-sequel, but they did a DLC for that, the one where you go into Claptrap's mind and you revisited everything. They've definitely thought about that sort of concept. So to see that in an actual proper, like designed and carefully put together replay through that's just like an alternate playthrough could be really, really good, and I would like to see them reintroduce that into Borderlands 4. On top of that, there's expectations with endgame content. We saw some raids in Borderlands 3, and those were good fun. I don't think they fulfilled on the promise of what they were going to do with that, because I was expecting a lot more of that kind of content going into Borderlands 3. So I'm expecting to see more of that kind of content. They definitely started playing with mechanics more, which I think will play into any kind of end content they do like that. So you started having sort of standing on crystals and plates, that kind of thing in the second raid in Borderlands 3. And then the Wonderlands, you could tell they were definitely playing around with other kinds of endgame content, because they had the Chaos Chambers, and then they had the DLC content for that, which was also kind of like an extension of the Chaos Chambers, but you had different kind of modifiers and arenas and stuff like that that you were working through. So they've definitely got it on their mind, and I really hope they do some fantastic stuff for Borderlands 4 Endgame. The arms race was something else they played around with in Borderlands 3, where you were doing kind of a drop-in sort of battle royale-ish kind of run through, or I guess almost like extraction shootery. To have that kind of thing definitely should be able to work very well in the Borderlands formula, so I'd like to see something like that. Just the more options for endgame variety, you know, the better it's going to be for Borderlands, because you don't have to be into something, but to have more options for the player and to be able to pull in more audiences and have, you know, different places to go for different kinds of new gear and loot and everything, you know, that's just going to be really, really good. So I hope that we see a lot of variety once the story is all done and dusted. And then just a few thoughts on the story itself. In the trailers so far, we started with a teaser where after Lilith like teleported or whatever happened with Elpis, and it's appeared the other side of space somewhere, it's crashed into this hidden planet that we understand is called Kairos, and we're coming in. I think we've been told this is a few years after the events of Borderlands 3. So there's going to have been a fair amount of story that's taken place before this, and that's going to be fun going in and sort of catching up and sort of seeing what, you know, what the aftermath of that event is. I definitely recommend going and watching the teaser trailer again. Now we've sort of found out a bit more about Borderlands 4, although I'll probably put the teaser trailer and the other trailers in the background of this video, so you'll probably have seen them by the point that I'm blabbering on about this. But yeah, there's a lot that could happen there, and spoilers warning, we know we've seen Elpis in the sky above Kairos a number of times, but in a recent screenshot that was released on Nintendo's website, which there's videos about on my channel, you actually find Kairos completely destroyed in the sky, which feels like a pretty big like story spoiler. But I was thinking about this, and maybe it's not. Maybe this is going to be part of how the game actually plays out, because you've got this enemy that's meant to be the timekeeper, and I mean, if it does what it says on the box, then we're going to have some sort of time meddling in the game. Like I previously was talking about with potential replay throughs of the game, they could do something really clever on that basis, which would be nice to see. But we have these different kind of biomes or areas of the game we've seen so far, and we've definitely seen ones that seem to signify almost seasons. You know, that's maybe just the variety of stuff. But you've got one that's very summery, like tropical. You've got a very autumny, sort of more aridy kind of place. you've got a very, very snowy place, and then you've got somewhere that's a bit more kind of springy, or kind of, you know, there's sort of almost like the seasons are spread out on Kairos, as if maybe time is sort of different there. But then you've got these towers, which have featured in every trailer so far, which there's also videos on my channel about. But these towers are clearly very important to all of the story and are going to be sort of the focus point. I don't know if the whole planet is going to be mechanical in some sense, but you have these massive machines that the Timekeeper and his forces are centered around. And then those machines have, at least some of them, have cities attached to them that are caged in kind of prison cities, absolutely massive cages. So there's going to be some sort of imprisonment there, which all ties into the story and the advertising for Borderlands 4 with this whole idea of break free. I think it's not just break free from the planet, it's going to be break free from this oppressive prison societies that are on Kairos. So you've got, you know, this idea that maybe time is going to be being meddled with, and I wonder if that breaking up of Elpis in the sky is maybe somehow going to be tied into almost a Deathloop, Zelda-y kind of repetitive Groundhog Day kind of vibe with the game. So maybe we're going to actually be going in sort of cycles of stuff anyway, where events will get to a point where something catastrophic like a moon blowing up maybe happens, but then maybe we sort of rewind and then go back through. It's odd to think about how that could work in a Borderlands sense, but there's definitely a potential there that maybe that isn't, you know, maybe that's not a massive spoiler. Maybe, you know, that breaking, like the moon being damaged and then completely falling to pieces, is actually just going to be part and parcel of the, you know, the daily kind of grind, the daily playing of the game. Yet again, we'll have to wait and see. That's just my kind of thoughts on what potentially could be happening with the story. And then this whole break free concept with the cage cities and this whole planet being a cage. You know, I think the story that may have happened before we get to this point, with Lilith showing up on this planet, smashing through the atmosphere, and having gone through the ordeal that she did with Tyrene and Troy, and kind of losing herself and finding herself. I mean, I think Lilith's been well overplayed at this point anyway. I think she should have, you know, Commander Lilith's DLC was kind of her swan song. I thought that was going to be, you know, goodbye to her at that point, but we did all of Borderlands 3 with her. Maybe she's, you know, going to feature in Borderlands 4, but I wonder whether we're going to see the aftermath of Lilith. So it's hard to explain. There's a lot of things I've seen in the trailer so far. So you've got the moon, which this is more of a writer side thing, but the moon has a symbol on it which some people think of as a peace symbol, but it's actually an inverted broken cross, which could potentially signify the idea of a failed salvation. I mean, like if you're just taking that symbol as raw as you can. An upside down cross that's broken. So something went wrong. So does Lilith crash into Kairos and then find this oppressive society and this guy that's keeping everyone trapped? And then maybe Lilith just does a Lilith and just goes headfirst into this thing, tries to take the Timekeeper on, gives these people a kind of glimmer of hope, you know, this person fighting back against this powerful Timekeeper guy, and then maybe the society is then sort of split and they start to get like an air of rebellion, and maybe it doesn't work out. Maybe the story of Borderlands 4 will be following in the wake of that after Lilith failed to save these people. But at the same time, she's planted that seed. She's planted that seed of rebellion in the people, and there's two different things that I've seen in the trailers so far which could signify different factions of Kairos' society that are into that mindset but going in slightly different directions. So you've got these graffiti and murals around the game that seem to have this kind of fire triangle attached to them, which to me, a fire triangle is, you know, a firehawk, a firebird, like a simplistic form of that. So maybe This group, which I think they have it on like bases and that as well, the people there are normal people, but they seem to have kind of almost like a rebellion-y kind of rebel group kind of vibe to them. And that's, I think, this fire kind of faction. And they're really actively trying to fight back, I think, at the Timekeeper and his forces. But then you also have this kind of Tibetan monk kind of vibe with a lot of the other NPCs we've seen so far. And that, I think, is surrounded around kind of what's going to be our, not social space, but like our hub area. So I think there's going to be our kind of sanctuary equivalent in this kind of area, where I think people have kind of split off into one group where they're kind of making peace with the whole situation, and they're kind of spiritually kind of fighting back in a way and trying to, like, you know, just get away from this oppressive mindset, but then not choosing to be violent. I don't know, that's just two different things we see. But with that second group in the area we've seen, that looks like it could be a social I keep saying social space, a hub area. There's symbols that are used in kind of the ornaments around there, and in particular, and I've talked about this before, but there's a shrine at the back of the room, and the shrine has two kind of concentric circles that are broken open. And to me, that signifies, you know, that could be that this is that kind of group's new symbol, and it's the idea of the planet being in the middle with the shield around it, and Lilith showing up has shattered it open. So they've got this kind of almost like a C shape that sort of shows up on different things around the trailers, which sort of, to me, is their kind of symbols. That's, the other guys have the fire triangle, these guys have this kind of broken free kind of symbol, and I think that that's kind of all maybe echoing towards Lilith, and what's happened before Borderlands 4. You know, this is just me taking quite a liberty on very little information, but it's just my thoughts on things. But then another part of that extension is that when they're writing Borderlands 4, they were also, I think, still writing Borderlands 3. So I think there's things that are going to have crossover, and I'm not going to have time to go into all the crossover and things I've seen, but the idea of this Queen Calypsis, she's called, is the other main antagonist, I think, is what we've seen. The person that seems to be in charge of the Rippers, the Psychos on Kairos. And she has these big arms coming out of her back, which are very, very similarly positioned to where a set of wings would be on a siren. So I think that this character is going to be either an ex-siren, or is still a siren, but she's been beaten up a load, she's been broken down a load, she's mostly robotic, she maybe doesn't know who she is properly anymore, but she's kind of become the queen of these psychos. And you've got crossover there because that kind of concept was really in Borderlands 3, because you had Queen Tyreen that was in charge of all the psychos, and their name was Calypso, so really that was Queen Calypso. But then in this game we've got Queen Calypsis, which is odd. It seems a little bit too close. I really hope that that's not Tyreen. I think that would be difficult, but I think maybe there's some writing origins that have happened here. And I'm trying to think. I think the word Calypsis means like veiled or hidden or something like that. So there may be a giveaway with the name of the character as well. But I don't think it would be Tyreen. But writers definitely and definitely Gearbox writers like to reuse stuff, and they like to try and, you know, get one over on the audience by, you know, bringing someone back or whatever. So we've got a few different sirens already in existence that have the potential to be this Queen Calypsis in some form, and the chief ones for that would be Lilith herself, because you've got this imagery in the original teaser of her shattering the dome around the planet, but then you have all these meteorites falling down. You have these kind of stars falling to the planet, fiery stars. So there's this sort of idea of the fire coming down, and my understanding is that you see her pick up the Psycho Mask. That's meant to be Queen Calypsis picking up the Psycho Mask. And it's almost like she's kind of looking at it and remembering what happened. Like almost kind of, you know, looking back at this glimpse of who and what she used to be. But I really hope that's not the way they go with it. But it's a possibility, particularly with other sort of crumbs that we're seeing there. Another possibility would be maybe Tannis, just because maybe there's sort of been time where like they've caught up with Lilith and things have gone wrong, and then Tannis has somehow ended up as this character. I think that's less likely, but one of the main reasons for thinking that is because she has Angel's power, and Angel sort of has the ability to control like robotics, mechanical stuff. So there's a tie there where that would make sense that she was a bit mechanical, and then all of the psychos are being made mechanical, and then it seems like there's sort of a way that Queen Calypsis is sort of empowering or controlling them. So that could be a thing, but I think less likely. I think the two best ideas, if this is a path that it goes down, is that Commandant Steel definitely looks the most like Queen Calypsis does, and we never really saw too much of her. She got the hole through her from the Destroyer, so there's big questions about how she would have ended up there or anything else. We never really saw her powers, but that's a possibility if they were to try and pull that back. And we know that they've tried to sort of play with the idea of not re-envisioning, but sort of toyed with her being around still, because they did a version of her in Tales from the Borderlands in Shade's museum. But probably the strongest possibility would be to do a Star Warsy Anakin kind of vibe, where Ava was Maya's kind of protege, and was not well received by the audience of Borderlands 3. So you could have this redemption kind of story of things going wrong and Ava turning up, and then Ava fighting like hell to try and deal with this situation, and it all going wrong, and bit by bit she gets taken apart by the Timekeeper, and then the same sort of thing where maybe she sort of then ends up, falling in with the kind of Rippers. They sort of find her and then sort of put her back together, and she's just this sort of shell of who she was. But there's I always forget the name of it, but Maya had a power which allowed her to control enemies, to control people, which is how Troy used the power to create the Anointed in Borderlands 3. So it's that same idea again about psychos being controlled by someone to an extent. But that definitely could be a path that it could take. You definitely have that sort of Anakin turning into Darth Vader kind of plot that could just be getting borrowed by Borderlands here. But this is all just me playing around with an idea that, it's easy to do that, to just be like, hey, let's just keep someone here and just, use the connection the player already has to someone to get easy writing. I really hope that that's not the way it goes. I really hope that the Timekeeper and Calypsis and the whole story on Kairos is all basically brand new. I hope that it's just, it's all fresh ideas. There's new angles on stuff, but then new information opening and filling sort of holes that have been in the story so far, and new sort of ideas and bits and pieces that are just going to keep us interested. But it's so easy to keep dragging back old ideas, and they did the whole reverse Midas touch with Handsome Jack by keeping him around too long and doing too much with him. So I really have this horrible thought that they're going to just try and repeat things. Like, I even considered the idea that the Timekeeper has some control with time and space, and maybe we'd get a scenario where, like, from an alternate timeline, alternate versions of characters, Queen Calypsis could actually be an alternate timeline Lilith, and the Timekeeper could somehow be an alternate timeline Roland. I really hope that we don't have any of that kind of nonsense in this game, but it's just, people just like to do that sort of thing. So let's hope it's all fresh. And then the last thing, I guess, to chew on is maybe the most important, is just loot in general. Loot systems for Borderlands are the bread and butter. They are the thing that has made the games what they have been. Every component counts, but without the loot, it all ends up being meaningless. Without the continuance to work on your character, to find new gear, to find new fun ways to play, to become more of a badass. I mean, that's ultimately what Borderlands is all about. It's about becoming a badass, despite Borderlands 3 ridiculous decision to change badass rank to Guardian rank. I mean, I don't know who makes these ridiculous decisions, but that was terrible. But yeah, ultimately, it's about the loot. And Borderlands 2's loot system is still the best. You had 7 different types of rarity. You had, you know, a nice variety of archetypes of guns. You had lots of different effects that could happen with the weapons and synergies with the Vault Hunters themselves. Borderlands 3 did a pretty good job, but the loot was just absolutely terrible at dropping. You'd be getting legendaries left, right, and center. That is not how the loot should work. All of the gun types just became meaningless, and then legendaries became meaningless because being legendary didn't mean it was legendary. Like, you could have legendaries that were just absolutely awful, just like picking up a green, and then you had some that were hugely effective. It just didn't work at all. The idea of the anointed weapons wasn't bad, but it closed off just like you get loot drops that were just meaningless to you. They need to have some way of better thinking something like that, because if you're going to have a system where you have a synergy with a character, it needs to have still a bonus perk for everyone. So everyone is still going to be getting a good upgrade of that weapon. But if you have a synergy with a specific thing that your character has very high ability to, you know, to have a synergy with, then that's the extra bonus. But you should still have an improvement on that weapon. It shouldn't be a meaningless upgrade just because you're not, you know, Mose at that time, or you're not Zane at that time. You know, or you need some way for that to fluctuate. Loot systems in general for this kind of game needed to evolve more faster. Borderlands 3 did not meet the mark of where the loot needed to be. There was fun tools in there was fun bits of kit, but you know, you need modifiers on things that enhance. Let me think about this. How do I word this? So Elder Scrolls Online does a very good thing with gear. You can hold, I'm probably going to forget this because it's so long ago. I think you can hold, you have 7 items equipped. And we'll use this as an example. I'll just simplify this as best I can. But so if you could have 5 items of the same set, then you will get an extra bonus on those, which means that then you can do a lot of stuff with builds. And then you would get a bonus at 2 items, 3 items, 4 items, and 5 items the same. So you'd want to get 5 that all matched in a set to be able to get some extra bonus, and then 2 others from a different set that have a really good second bonus. There's different kind of balancing and building that you can do there that just is an intelligent idea. So if you had it in a Borderlands sense, and I know it's different because we're on Kairos, but there's still be zones on Kairos, but if we were saying in Borderlands 3, you would have stuff, so you'd say, okay, there's weapons that drop uniquely on Athenas. And those weapons, if you have multiples of them equipped, then you will get some sort of Athenan bonus. You know, that's a way that you can enhance the way the weapons are. And then work out a lot more different sort of synergies with your build. Destiny makes me think about this a lot of the time, because loot generally in Destiny is completely pointless. Like, their loot system has always been broken. It's been sometimes extremely broken, like at the very start of the game, but they've got better, but it's still pointless. But you need other modifiers in there. So say, you know, you want reasons to look at greens and look at blues, because all that stuff's going to drop. You don't want them to all be useful, but if you have, say, a blue, and we'll use a Destiny example this time, and you say, oh, the Fallen have been messing with weapons in this area, and you know, you might get blue weapons that maybe have a legendary bonus to them. So you get like a fairly normal pistol, but you can find a variant of that blue gun that will be like a red flavored text one in Borderlands, but you'd get one where, I don't know, it's got some random chaotic bonus on it that means that it has a chance to fire 2 bullets instead of 1 at a fairly high percentage. You now have a completely useless gun, which in certain circumstances could actually be really fun to use. You know, there's a reason now to look at blues, because you might find something that would be really kind of clever like that. Then say you had, I don't know, Zero had Two Fang, so if you've got Two Fang and then you have this blue gun that also can chuck out double bullets, you know, you've got some really crazy things that can start to happen there. Yes, it's going to be hell for the development team to try and keep track of stuff, but you know, that's where the design in your game comes in. Like, and it doesn't matter, your numbers go high enough, you have all your mayhem levels or your OP levels, whatever you want to call them, that are going to come in and then are going to combat the sort of some numbers you're seeing when, you know, real world players are starting to engage in that world. It's fine to balance things in the aftermath, like that's always going to happen. But I'm not such a fan of that. I prefer you just threw the numbers up on the game. Just make it so, you know, okay, people are getting better builds and better setups because of how the gear is. Let's give the boss another, you know, 2 times health. Like, given that it still works with the majority of your players, I don't see what's wrong with that. So yeah, you'd have modifiers on existing guns. Like, Wonderlands did a very good thing with its guns. So with the Chaos Chambers, there's 100 levels of Chaos Chambers, which is a very good endgame thing. You don't have to do them all, but you can skip through, but then when you're higher in the ranks, you do have to do them a bit at a time. But it's a fun thing to just drop in and play with your friends. It is too simplistic, they needed more variety. But you've got hidden bosses, all kinds of other things in there which make it fun. But once you get to a high enough chaos level, you're applying that chaos level to the overall game. And the higher the chaos level goes, you start to get versions of any bit of gear or gun in the game. And so you'll first get chaotic versions of weapons. Then once you get to a higher, like, and the percentage for the drop basically changes. So you'll have a percentage that means that eventually you're going to get a lot of chaotic weapons drop. Then you'll get volatile weapons drop as your levels go up. Then you get primordial weapons, and then the top one is ascended weapons. So once you've got into like the high chaos numbers, you'll have high percentage drops for ascended weapons. So your favorite gun, you can now get your favorite gun and it's got even better numbers on it. It's too simplistic, but it's a good system because you now have a reason to re-look at all the guns and gear and that you have, because you're just constantly trying to make yourself more powerful to take on higher and higher levels and harder enemies, and that's kind of all part of the game. Wonderlands did not have the time and attention that it should have done. I guess everything got funneled into putting all the company's energy into Borderlands 4. Wonderlands should have been Borderlands in a fantasy world, and it's sort of there, but the content and the size of what you got with Wonderlands was about, I would say, about a quarter to a third of what I expect from a mainline Borderlands game. So Borderlands 2 and Borderlands 3 being the best example there. And that's basically all we got. DLC was just a redo of some of the endgame content. There was no extra expansion on that. So it was very, very small in comparison, and you could feel it. You could feel it for sure. So I hope that there's better changes for that in Wonderlands 2. But for now, let's stay focused on Borderlands 4. And there's lessons that have been learned in Borderlands 3 and 2 and 1 and Wonderlands. And definitely some lessons that were learned over the course of Battleborn that I think, you know, there could be some really, really good, interesting stuff here. But we're just going to have to put a bit of faith in Gearbox. I'm really looking forward to this evening. We'll find out more about the game and whether anything that I've said here is even remotely right. But let's just hope that Gearbox have got this one in the bag. I'm really, really looking forward to Borderlands 4 now. Let's hope that the guns and the gear and the story and everything have been treated with a lot of respect and a lot of thought, a lot of proper testing. Let's hope that the bugs are minimal this time, because we've had some terrible stuff on launch, and being pulled forward 2 weeks to September 12th definitely fills me with some concerns. But yeah, let's hope that it's a good one, guys. If you're looking forward to Borderlands 4, then do check out the State of Play PlayStation stream tonight. That is 2 p.m. Pacific time in the States. In the UK here, that's going to be at 10 p.m. I think that's correct, but you probably want to give it a Google. Thanks very much for watching this, guys. I hope you had a bit of fun. I hope you found this information interesting. If you did, please do like and subscribe. Please do comment on this video, and have a great evening. Take it easy. Peace out.